The New York Islanders are cooking. And no, I'm not referring to their defeat yesterday of the Chicago Blackhawks, 3-1 yesterday. I'm talking about what they're brewing in Bridgeport. Because when it comes to the New York Islanders and their farm team in the AHL, the Bridgeport Islanders, this team has really gone out there and showcased that some prospect development stories don't really fester and put themselves in the main spotlight until they're right under your nose. Let's talk today about probably the most impressive showcase of talent we have seen this season from a team's collective group of prospects in the AHL, especially when you compare what happened last season to most of these players to where they are now. The main reason we're talking about this is because if you go over onto Andrew Gross's Twitter account, he posted an update from yesterday. Bridgeport's Ruslan Iskhakov is the AHL Rookie of the Month for October, beginning his North American career with 4 goals and 7 assists in 7 games. Now, you might look at this and say, wait a minute, Lego, this is just a simple tweet. How are you making a whole X amount of minutes long video about prospects when you just saw this? Well, the reason I thought this was interesting is because Ruslan Iskhakov is actually a guy I had wanted to make a video about before. 4 years ago, on October of 2018, I made this thumbnail talking about Ruslan Iskhakov and whether or not he could be the Russian version of Johnny Gaudreau. Now, unfortunately, that video was never made, but the reason we made it back in 2018 was because Iskhakov was a guy that was drafted by the Islanders in the 2018 draft. Second round, 43rd overall, 5'8", 152. So he's a small guy, a pretty small center right there. And in his draft -1 season, he absolutely dominated the Slovak U18 scene, putting up 104 points in 44 games played, amongst other players in his age range. The next season, which was his draft season, he was an MHL guy. He was a point per game over there. And I kind of said, hey, this guy's going over to the University of Connecticut. He's going to be hopefully pretty good. And if his offensive skills that were present in Europe are able to translate to North America, then that's going to be pretty good. And for the most part, they sort of did. He had back-to-back 21-point years in 32 games played both seasons. He had the same points in the same games before going over to TPS Turku in the Finnish Liga. He was a pretty good point producer over there as a 20-year-old. And then he played for Adler Mannheim in the DEL, getting 22 points in 25 games last year. That's a sub-point per game metric in a top pro men's league in Europe. So it definitely was a good sign for a lot of Islanders fans keeping their eyes on Iskhakov and seeing how his development was going. Nowadays, though, you see what he's doing in the AHL, the Bridgeport Islanders, for the New York Islanders farm team, and in the 8-game sample he's got 11 points. He is on pace for 100 points on the year, and this is a guy that, if you take a look at what the Bridgeport Islanders are doing as a whole, he is not the only one that's gone out there and absolutely shown off in the best way possible to kick off 22-23. Before we go over to that, though, a little bit more on Iskhakov, this is a guy that I really do think that if he pans out to what he probably could be, you're looking at maybe a power play 2, middle 6 caliber small center that could go out there and just produce a heck of a lot of points, maybe 40 or 50 points in an NHL season as a max output. And that's not bad at all for a guy drafted in the second round, especially at 5'8". Iskhakov has had success everywhere he's gone when it comes to producing points, and the AHL so far, to kick off the season, has been his playground, hence the Rookie of the Month nomination. I just have a little bit more of a sentimental attachment to this player because I kind of wanted to talk about him a few years ago. This scouting report, written by Mark Allen from March of 2020 on Dobber Prospects, goes over Iskhakov and his skills. The Russian's reputation as a sublimely skilled player is growing at the University of Connecticut, although he isn't. A mere 5'7" and 152, so he was actually shorter back then, the 19-year-old forward has raw skill to spare, including breathtaking puck handling and dazzling mobility. 42 points in his first 63 games for the Huskies isn't impressive, but Iskhakov works hard and is surprisingly physical as he competes aggressively for pucks, including in front of opponents' nets. If he doesn't grow and add strength, he likely won't make it as a pro center. His junior season will offer a better hint about his potential. So I'm pretty hyped for Iskhakov, but as we said, there are other players on the Islanders that are doing well too. Take a look at the top point producers on this team, and you'll see that Iskhakov is number 1, but right behind him on the blue line is Samuel Bolduc. Now, Bolduc is a guy who was drafted in the second round in 2019, so a year after Iskhakov, this was the next Islanders second round pick. He is a 6'4", 220 left-handed defenseman, a big dude who is 21 years old, and last season with the Islanders, the AHL team that is, he took a pretty big step back in point production. He had 7 points in 57 games played, which was a huge decline from what he had the previous season where he had 14 points in 24 games, literally double the production in half the games from 2021 to 2022. So definitely not something you would like to see there. But this season, Bolduc has gone out there with 10 points in 8 games instead. He has already bested his last season's worth of production, and he's done it in a fraction of the games. He had been slowed down a ton by injuries, the virus, and all this other crap over the years, so seeing Bolduc really blossom into what he is now for the Bridgeport Islanders is a great thing. The Dobber report on Dobber Prospects says that he's big and strong, but he skates well for a big guy, showing signs of being a future power play weapon, but he also doesn't ignore the defensive side of the game. He could be a bit more physical, but he is a potential top 4 NHL blue liner. You want to talk about hyping a guy up? Let's look at 2021's January report, also written by Mark Allen on this same defenseman. Barry Trotz recently compared the 2019 second-round pick to Washington point-generating blue line John Carlson. Bolduc's former QMJHL coach Bruce Richardson responded by saying perennial Norris candidate Victor Hedman is a better comparison. Either way, the Isles hope Bolduc can resume his development soon in his pro debut with Bridgeport. The AHL is scheduled to begin its pandemic-delayed season on February 5th. So yeah, we've got NHL caliber coaches, QMJHL caliber coaches saying that Bolduc is like John Carlson. He's like Victor Hedman. And yeah, I mean, the point production in the AHL certainly would indicate that he's got an offensive flair to his game, especially this season comparative to before. But he is not even it either. There's another guy that I wanted to talk about here when it comes to Islanders players on the Islanders, and I say it like that because, you know, the farm team is also called the Islanders. Aatu Raty, he's got 5 points in 8 games played, and we're finally starting to see Aatu Raty in a North American setting. It took him a while. He was here for a small amount of time last season after wrapping up his point-per-game campaign with Jukurit in the Liga, but he actually was a fairly good point producer for the Bridgeport Islanders in the playoffs, getting 4 points in 6 games last season. Now, this season, he's at 5 points in 8 games. Obviously, it's not the best in the world, but the guy is only 19 years old. So we can give him a pass. He was drafted 3 years after a guy like Ruslan Iskhakov was drafted. So just seeing the development and the prospect showcase that a lot of these guys have had, it indeed is very nice. If you want to report on Raty, I mean, he was supposed to be first overall in 2021, so we've made a ton of videos about this guy. If you're any form of an Islanders fan that has been keeping up in some respect with the prospects, you know who Aatu Raty is, you know his story, you know that he was supposed to be first, but he slipped all the way to the second round in 2021, so look at the Islanders, man. All these second-round picks actually doing things and becoming good players in the AHL. I'm a Vancouver Canucks fan, so seeing prospects get drafted and developed in the American Hockey League and actually getting good in the AHL, like, that's completely foreign to me. The Vancouver Canucks, my team, they don't do that. They don't use the AHL properly. They never are able to get guys drafted, put into the NHL, and actually good enough to showcase NHL potential down the line. So for the Islanders, I'm quite jealous that your draft picks have been developing properly outside your system. They've been brought into the AHL, and they've actually been pretty good. Aatu Raty, Ruslan Iskhakov, not to mention Bolduc, these 3 guys, they are cooking. And you're not even talking about Simon Holmstrom, who was also on this team. Not to mention William Dufour, Otto Koivula. Some of these guys have been a little bit more useful for the team than others, but at the same time, I mean, just looking at some of the prospects the Islanders have in their system that are developing under the new coach, and now you have a guy in Iskhakov that actually might be a potential call-up. I mean, He's really young, and he's really small, but I feel like if you're needing a guy to maybe replace a guy like Soshnikov, let's say somebody gets injured and you have to move up the pecking order. You already lost Bellows on waivers. You're keeping Soshnikov in that spot. If you move everybody up, maybe Iskhakov is that guy. Who really knows? I mean, talk in the comments if you're an Islanders fan, all your thoughts and opinions about your prospects developing in the AHL. What are your thoughts on these three guys, and how do you think we discuss them over here? Anything to add? Anything to correct me on? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this Ruslan 9. And bye.